my sister's friend, his name is Roger, gives me a call and he's asking me how I'm doing. I'm saying I'm fine, holding up okay. And he asks me, have you talked to anyone at home? How they doing? I'm like, they're doing okay. And he's like, do you know about Rhoda? Then I'm like, what about Rhoda? Rhoda is my sister and she's doing okay. She went home and she buried my dad. But by the way, my sister lived in Australia and she had gone home to bury my dad on that Friday, and she buried my dad. And I was like, why is he asking me about my sister? So he breaks down and he asks me to call home. And I'm like, why is he asking me to call home? I start getting frantic. And my brother picks up the phone and he asks Roger what is going on. Is she okay? And Roger breaks down. And that's when we know that's when we find out that my sister is gone. My name is Lydia Atandi. I'm 32 years old. Um, I am a physician, I'm a nurse as well, and I'm Kenyan and I'm American, and you know, passionate about patriotic and passionate about both countries, but mostly Kenyan by heart. Um, I love music very much. I've always been inclined to music ever since I was very little, but I discovered my passion more when I was in high school, and that's when I just went for it all the way. So, yeah.
Hear your honest prayer, O Lord. Hear your humble cry. Precious, loving, caring Lord, on whom we rely. Ever-loving, ever-living God, of whom no one can compare. All we ask is that you hear our prayer. Give us strength, most holy Lord, strength to meet each day. Lead us by your holy word, guide us in your way. For life is filled with winding turns. We have often lost our way. All we ask is that you lead today. Give us love that's true, oh Lord, trusting as a child. Love for all we need, oh Lord, pure and undefiled. But to heal the hurt and all turn away anyone who is in need. All we ask is teach us love indeed. Take me home with you, oh Lord, when my life is through. Take me home in peace, oh Lord, let me rest in you. When a father fight and I've kept the pain, and my work on earth is done. Lord, please let me hear you say, well done. Lord, please let us hear you say, well done, well done, well done.
You've sung 2 songs. Please
Yes.
tell us more about the songs and how they speak to you.
The first song I sang was Hear Up My Prayer, O Lord, Hear Our Prayer, Lord. It's just pretty much literally what the words of the song say. Hear Our Prayer is, a prayer to God, a plea to God to hear your prayer, to hear you out. I listened to it mostly during the pandemic because it was a prayer for what was happening globally to us and also individually to me and my family. It was just asking God to hear our cry and listen to us. It encourages me, and it also just feels good to express your heart to God, to cry to God.
All right, that's good. So please tell us more about your family members. Are you all into music, or are you the only black sheep?
I am, of the black sheep. My mom is also musical, but I'm the most musically inclined person.
Okay.
I am a second born in a family of 4. I had my sister, she passed on, rest in peace, Rhoda, and then I have, so there was Rhoda and then there was me, there is me, and then there's my 2 little brothers, Paul and Mishak. We are all just different, but we just complement each other. 2 of us are introverts and 2 of us extroverts.
You are an extrovert?
But, no, not at all. Well, my family does not believe I'm an introvert, but I know I am.
Yeah.
But then there's real extroverts.
Okay.
My youngest brother and my older sister too was an extrovert. And my mom is such an extrovert too. So yeah, but my family is like my number 1 support system. I love them very much. They are my second most important thing aside from my relationship with God. They come second to me, like they're my second source of fulfillment after my relationship with God.
Yeah.
So they mean so much to me. Yeah.
So I know 2020 was quite tough for you.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling us more about how you lost your close family members, and how you received the news, and how have you been able to process it throughout the years?
Yeah. So 2020 was a challenging moment, for the whole world, right? But more so for my family. So I was in school, I was in nursing school, and it was just a weird year. Everyone experienced everything that happened with the virus. And so on October 22nd, I had just come from clinicals the day before, and I had spoken to my dad 2 days before, and he seemed to be doing okay for the most part. And so on the 22nd at 3 a.m., my brother knocks at my room. He comes to my room and he's sobbing, he's crying, and Misha really cries. And I'm asking him what's wrong. And he's like, sobbing uncontrollably. And I'm asking him what's wrong, wondering what's going on. And then that's when he breaks the news to me that Dad is gone. And I'm like, what do you mean? I just talked to him the day before, like 2 days before. And that was unbelievable. I could not fathom that. And I did not process it. Like it took me, it wasn't making any sense to me. It was not absorbing in my system that my dad was gone. So the next day, I remember I had a presentation at like 7 a.m. I don't even know what happened. My good friend Sylvia did it for me after explaining to my instructors what had happened. I had visitors the next day, but it was just an excruciating moment for me. It was very painful. I couldn't believe it. And funny enough, the day before we were looking at pictures, our childhood pictures, and I particularly have this image in my mind of my dad with a love heart on his head. And that one stuck in my mind, and it was so coincidental that happened, like literally on the day that he had passed on. And the painful thing is that we were not able to go home at that time because of many various factors. I didn't have some documents that I needed to go home. And, I also had school and the bills coming, but that was not the most important factor. And I remember when my dad got buried that we made it as live as possible, as we tried to make it as real an experience as possible to us. So we had watched him live. And that day, I just felt, so it was 6th of November when we had organized for us to watch my dad's burial. And I remember feeling very much at peace because of the things that my people said about my dad. He was such a prayerful person. He was an encouraging person. They all said the same thing. And the most striking thing about my dad is his relationship with God, is his heart for people. His heart was so tender, so kind, so loving. And that's what made me the person that I am today. He taught me how to pray. He taught me to look at God as my best friend. And I remember feeling very much peaceful with that fact. And it was just, as much as we were crying and sobbing and heartbroken, we were at the same time encouraged by, who my dad was. It was really such a peaceful feeling for me, like all the things that my father said, the other things that people said about my dad on the day that we were sending him off. And I remember the next day, okay, actually we were supposed to have a memorial for my dad and my sister, for my dad, that the next Sunday, because the burial was on 6th and the memorial was supposed to be on 8th. So on 6th, we're all going home and everyone has gone home and we're just at peace, And on 7th, we wake up and we go to church and, it's just a good day. And I'm coming from church that day and my sister's friend, his name is Roger, gives me a call and he's asking me how I'm doing. I'm saying I'm fine, holding up okay. And he asks me, have you talked to anyone at home? How are they doing? I'm like, they're doing okay. And he's like, do you know about Rhoda? Then I'm like, what about Rhoda? Rhoda is my sister and she's doing okay. She went home and she buried my dad. But by the way, my sister lived in Australia and she had gone home to bury my dad on that Friday, and she buried my dad. And I was like, why is he asking me about my sister? So he breaks down and he asks me to call home. And I'm like, why is he asking me to call home? I start getting frantic. And my brother picks up the phone and he asks Roger, what is going on? Is she okay? And Roger breaks down. And that's when we that's when we find out that my sister is gone. And I remember I lost sanity, I could say. I walked down the flight of stairs and then I walked up the flight of stairs again and I walked down the flight of stairs in our apartment complex, and I just could not fathom that. And I really hoped that someone could get me out of that dream. I felt like that was a dream and I really, really was hoping for someone to get me out of it. So people were coming and visiting, and that all that was happening was not making sense. So that was like literally the lowest point of my life. And I was really, really hoping to wake up, but that was not happening. And I remember we had this pastor that came and he was talking about the story of Job, and it wasn't making sense in my mind. I was like, don't tell me about Job. Don't tell me about Job, because no, this is not our reality. So that day when I go home, I go to bed, of course, sobbing my eyes out, and waking up the next day hoping that I was dreaming, but that was not a dream. So I was questioning God, asking like, what is this phenomenon? What is this sinister situation? Like, why? And never in my life have I felt so like life was so fragile and so vulnerable, because it was such a phenomenon. And my best friend, I remember she told me how someone had asked her, have you heard about this that has happened to this family? And my best friend was like, oh yeah, that's my best friend. So that's how far it spread, because of how unusual that was. So that was the lowest moment in my life, and I literally pray that it never gets worse than that. And the hard part too was, doing things all over again, burial plans all over again, fundraisers all over again. Everything had to be done all over again. And it was just heartbreaking. The most heartbreaking thing for me is that I could not be there physically for my mom as much as I wanted to. And we happened to have, of course, my dad's memorial that was planned on the 8th of November didn't happen because of everything. So we had to do a joint memorial for my dad and my sister after my sister was buried. So we also had like a live, burial ceremony, which was of course also so sad and very emotional. And one thing that gives me peace is how close we were with my sister, especially on the last days when we were encouraging each other about that. Another thing that encourages me is how my sister held on to God, how much she clinged to God. And it was that moment that it was also a lot happening, because I was having to sit for an exam, an end of school exam, not just an end of semester exam. And if there was an exam that you needed to study for real hard, was that one. But we did that. We had that exam one day after we had the joint memorial. And before I speak about that exam, I'll speak about the memorial and how much peace we got from it. Because we really didn't have a funeral ceremony. It was like our little ceremony. It was our chance to express ourselves and how we felt for our loved ones. It was well attended by by our friends and family in Kansas, and also on Zoom by our family and friends here. So that was it gave us so much peace. So then the next day, I have this exam and I haven't studied anything, and it's supposed to cover everything that I have studied in school. And I just told God, if I pass, I pass. And if I don't, I don't. And just help me pass, if that is your will. And I went in there and I got an 84%, for which I was very grateful, and considering I had not done any studying. So from that time, God, career-wise, really God came through. He opened a lot of doors in my career. He gave me a lot of opportunities. And he gave me just such a good relief with my career, because I know I had gone through some things too with my career prior to everything. But I can say, that was literally the hardest part of our lives. I took it upon me to check up on my mom every single day, literally through video calls, more than once a day, because she's the one that was obviously most hit by everything. And so I remember you had asked me too about
God.
Yeah, how I felt about God. I didn't always feel like God was by my side. I felt at some point like God was distant. But I remember this thing about, someone walking with God, and there's a part that has 2 steps, and that there's a part that has 1 step, and he's asking God, the part that has 2 footprints, the part that has 1 footprint, what is that about? And that was the time that God was carrying him through the difficult moments. So that was the analogy of what I went through with that situation, because the moments that I felt like God wasn't really by my side, like the moments when I was really questioning, because it still is very sinister, very crazy. That is the moment that God was holding me together. God was putting my life together. God was protecting me from so much and giving me the strength to walk, not even one day at a time, not even 1 minute at a time, but 1 second at a time. And from that time, I can say that we're doing a lot better emotionally and mentally and all other ways. There's times too that it hits you, but really we have come a long way, and especially to see my mom how far she's come. I am very, very grateful to God. I still have questions, but like I mentioned, God does not answer questions, He answers prayers, and all we can do is pray for the peace to take 1 second at a time. And my advice, my encouragement to anyone who has gone through death of a very close person, and you never know how it feels until it hits you. My encouragement is for them to hang in there and just do it. Just imagine hanging in there, literally, like hanging by the edge of a cliff with a rope. And sometimes it does feel like you're holding onto a string. My advice is to hang onto that string. And even when you don't feel like praying to God, pray away, even if it's 2 words. Just say, God help me. Sometimes I used to just say, God help me, and that was my prayer. And my advice to them is to just don't sever your relationship with God. Trust Him when you can't trust Him. Like, just hang in there when you don't feel like hanging in there. Even when you feel like God is distant, just hang in there. Just mention 2 words. Just say 2 words. Like, just be honest with God about how you feel and tell Him, I don't feel like praying today, but you just help me. Or just open your heart and be honest to God. Hang in there, and I promise you, the moments when you feel like He is away, those are the moments He is holding you together. He is giving you grace for a lot of things that you can't even see, and He is going to take you through that situation. Grief is very complicated. It never dies. And everyone has their own different experience. But the one thing we can conclude, everyone can say that has gone through grief, is that it never goes away, but you just learn how to live with it. And you, especially if you trust in God, He gives you the peace to deal with that chronic pain, that chronic situation, that new situation. He gives you the grace to go through it. Yeah.
What kind of influence did your dad have in your life? And can you just portray the kind of a person he was to us?
Oh, my
Your
dad.
dad and probably your sisters.
My dad was a very congenial person, a very good-hearted person, and most of all, his trademark, his signature was prayer. He was a very prayerful person. Like, he would pray about anything and everything. He would pray about the biggest things, and he would pray about the littlest, tiniest things. He's the one who taught me that there is no such thing as a little prayer, too tiny a prayer for God, too little a prayer for God. He worked in the Ministry of Lands, and when he retired, and at that time he was an elder too in church, in Preschool Church, and then after he retired, he became a pastor. So I just remember he used to walk so closely with God, like he used to pray so much. And I also believe that his prayer really held our family together, and it also like made us who we were today. He was also with my dad, I felt so protected. I felt so like I felt so safe with my dad. Like, starting from a little girl, he would walk me to school back then. And when I held his hand, I felt so safe. Like, there were times that I would try to break away from that fist, and I couldn't. And it kind of just also reminds me of our relationship with God, how much of a father He is. That's how I felt about my dad. He was my rock. My sister was my best friend. Like, she was extroverted, like I mentioned, and she was just the sunshine in the room. Like, she would light the whole room. she was very bubbly. She was very talkative. She was very hilarious. And one thing I remember about her, she would make a situation so, like, even when you're worried, like, she would just diffuse it and make you feel like there's nothing to worry about. One of her favorite lines was, itakuwa tu sawa. Kwa sawa ni nini? Yeah, so those are one. And she was also my rock. Like, whenever I felt like I was in trouble or I felt like I didn't know what to do, I would call her and she would just start with itakuwa tu sawa, and then she would, walk me like, this is what we're going to do, and I'd feel so peaceful after that, so much at peace. We did have our moments like every other sisters, ups and downs, but especially those last days, we were each other's rock. And that's also like, it's emotional, but it also gives me a lot of peace, that how very, very tight, especially we got towards the end. So yeah, it really is good memories. As much as it is, it's sad, but it's also like very good memories, and yeah.
So what really caused her death?
She had a heart attack. Yeah, the weight of my father's death was so hard on her, and she had a pre-existing heart condition that we didn't know about, no one knew about. She had no symptoms, and that put a strain on her heart, and that's just what caused her to pass.
That was a day after you buried your...
That was literally a day after we had buried Dad. Okay. And the fact that all these things happened in the sequence that they did, as much as I don't have answers for it, I believe it happened for a reason. It happened for a reason. God knows the answers to everything. That I believe in the fact that there is a reason for it. And I don't know, but the fact that I'm here talking to you and I haven't lost my mind and I haven't, I'm still okay. And we are okay. We have come. We are not in a deep hole or, just that very dark place. Like, God has sustained us. That's a big doing of God too, And for some people, another thing that I would advise anyone that has gone through grief, it is okay to ask for help. It is okay to talk to therapists. I did have a therapy session once, by the way. Yeah, I had it once. And then, I don't know, something came up after that. I had to go to school. No, it wasn't school. No, I actually just needed one session. And I remember something else coincided after that session. But after that, I really was okay. But if you need to have therapy, if you feel like you need to talk to someone, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Please go for that, because those are people that God has given the skills and the tools to help us get out of this situation, to help us not really get out, but get through these situations. So hang on to God is my number one advice to you, even by that little string. And number two, it is okay to talk to people, professional people, if you feel like you're stuck in that place. Yeah. And number three, and I promise you, you will get through this. You will not get over it. You will get through it. Is what God promises and what will happen. Just hang on real tight to Him. The second song was "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God," and it just talks about how it's by Martin Luther King, and it talks about how God really is who we run to. We live in a world where the devil has corrupted a lot of things. He's destroyed a lot of things, and he's very powerful and wicked. But despite all of that, we still have a very powerful God. That's the most encouraging bit of it. That one little word by God, as the song says, shall fail him, shall totally destroy the devil. Yeah.
Okay.
Fortress is our God, a bulwark never fails. strength can't fight, all striving would be losing. Why not the right man on our side, the man of God's own choosing? Does ask who that may be. Christ Jesus, it is He, Lord Sabaoth of His name. From age to